Hey, 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 thanks for tuning in to the Biz Pulse. We are live and in action. Um, if you're not familiar with my channel, we try to talk about business related topics. We get to the pulse of the business, meaning inside people that are making the business happen. That's what we're all about here. So I'm excited because I've got and actually a guy that does a lot of podcasting himself and has a really great podcast called The Thinking Project, and also is a sales coach, a business consultant. I mean, he's going to probably blow us away with knowledge and just have some fun on the show. So um, please, let's give a round of applause to my man, Dalton.
Hey, thanks so much, T Rob. This is awesome, man. Your intro was great. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, man. Thanks for being on the Biz Pulse. Appreciate you. I kind of introduced you a little bit of talking about your podcast, but I'd love for you to touch on the podcast and just kind of tell me what it's all about.
Yeah, man. Yeah, thanks again. The podcast, like you mentioned, is the Thinking Project. It was made as a threefold. Actually, it was originally started to kind of help me advertise an online business that I had at the time. And then it was also a huge networking tool and a way for me to just meet a bunch of business owners. So the point of my podcast is more of a how-to, kind of similar to yours, but to bring on business owners to talk about the lessons they've had in business. So I've had over 250 episodes. We've been doing it for over 3 years. It's been a lot of fun. And over that time, I've had a crazy ride with things that have happened because of the podcast, both business wise and networking wise. So it's been awesome.
Oh, that's great, man. I didn't realize you had that many episodes. So you've been at it for a long time, man. So with your podcast, are you doing it in a studio? Are you bringing people in? Or are you doing a little bit of both? Or
I do both. I used to use StreamYard for a long time, but we have a studio where we bring in people in from. I'm in Salt Lake City, so we bring people who are in Salt Lake City, and so it kind of just depends. But yeah, we do both.
Okay, cool. Beautiful city. I love Salt Lake.
Yes, sir.
So tell everyone what Dalton does. I mean, what's your specialty in? What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of crazy. I'll break it down for you what I do. So I have a business called Aloha Views. We are a full cycle sales company. So we actually go to companies who need sales teams but can't afford full-time teams. And we provide a team. And so I train the team. I bring on people to do appointment setting, closing, lead generation, things like that. I do a fair amount of that myself with the company as well. And then my 9 to 5 is director of sales for a local franchising company here. So we're nationwide, but started here in Utah. So I love, and sales is one of those things that you can have a 9 to 5. And I don't think I'll ever give that up because I love being on a sales team. I love that kind of atmosphere, you know, but sales also lets you branch into the entrepreneur world and start your own business because sales is the lifeblood of everything that we do in business. So that's what I do though. My expertise, I've been in sales and sales training for over a decade and, have a course, written a book on it that was a huge flop, but,
That's okay.
but the book was fun to write, It was awesome. And I'm never going to say anything that I'm not, but so I'm barely an author, but been more successful in other parts of.
I mean, well, everyone tries different things and not everything you do is going to be successful. That's for sure. Especially an entrepreneur. I mean, you know that you try different stuff and sometimes it just doesn't work, I mean,
right.
But you keep going, you get up and wipe yourself off and keep going.
That's right. Yeah. Go ahead.
By the way, man, is that a jazz jacket?
Yeah.
You got it? Yeah. Yep. Okay.
We got, go Jazz.
Nice, man. Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So let's kind of stay on that sales line of things and tell people, like, if you had any like really helpful hints of how to grow maybe from a sales standpoint of how to scale a business. Is there secrets that you can share there?
Yeah, I love it. So not to plug anything, but what I developed over 10 years. So I'll give you a little bit of my history as far as like where it all started. So I actually started selling in my sales journey way back when was in car sales. And car sales, everybody, right? It's like lawyers, used car salesmen, and then like as far as like the most hated people, right? No, I'm just kidding. But used car salespeople up there, right?
Yeah.
And so I got in and I'm like a super friendly guy, like I'm super chipper, but like people immediately disliked me just because I was a car salesman.
Right.
And so I tried, like I read a bunch of books, I did a bunch of studying, I invested heavily in myself. And there was at one point, even car sales changed for me, and I made over, I made well into the six figures selling cars because I found out that there's a way to do sales, and even though people hate you, to quickly break down walls. And the principle is a buzzword now, but 10 years ago when I was doing this, it wasn't, and that's empathy, right? Like selling with a lot of empathy.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how my whole everything changed for me. Is like, and the whole program was built. I actually was a corporate sales trainer for Honda, so it helped train at other dealerships, just helped train in other things like that, and then bounced around because once you know that empathy is actually how you sell, and we can get into that. Then my hot take became, well, sales is sales at that point. Like if you can sell, like at one point I was working at Mercedes-Benz, we were selling $150,000 Benzes to CEOs, right? So if you can sell something like that, then I was like, I got a little hot-headed and I was like, well, then we can sell whatever. And crazy enough, the nuances are different, right? Like I've sold tech, I've sold digital marketing, I've sold cars, I've sold businesses, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Shoes and watches, whatever. And the crazy thing is like the sale is different and some of the nuances are different, but the people who buy them aren't, right? Like how people want to be treated isn't different. Doesn't matter if you're a CEO or you're a dad buying a $2,000 car for your daughter or your son, right?
Yeah.
So that was kind of it. And so when I go and help teams and businesses like build their sales process, because that's what I'm really good at, we start with question-based approach that like emphasizes empathy and learning what other people care about, right? Because there's that old cliche saying that like no one knows how much you care until, or no one, I don't know, I'm gonna butcher it, but everybody gets it right. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
Right.
And for as cliche as that is, it's very true. And people like it, and people can smell, I call it commission breath, right? And so when you get too crazy, people can smell it and they'll run away. And so we've kind of gone over that, and I've been pretty successful with that so far.
Oh, that's great. So I love that. I mean, your point is empathy, right? Like you have to have empathy, and I've been involved in sales pretty much all my life as well. And there's a lot of people that don't get that.
Yeah.
And they approach you and you go, oh, no, thank you. So I love that's something you figured out really early and have used that for ever how many years you've been doing it now. So great advice for sure.
Yeah, I love it. And in fact, people will come up and be like, I don't know if I could ever be a salesman. They're sleazy. And I'm like, hey, there are sleazy salespeople out there, but I make way more money than they do. So don't worry. But because there's nothing wrong. And so sales really helps you open up too, because one of the things it teaches you, as you well know, I'm sure, is that there's nothing wrong with making money. Like, in fact, a good sale is when my client feels like they got a better deal than I did, right? Like that's a bargain. Like that's a great deal, right? Like that's when you have a great opportunity to like make money, and there's nothing. And so when you can have a transaction like that, where somebody's like, wow, that's an amazing deal. Absolutely. Why wouldn't I do that? There's nothing wrong with making money. They got a better deal than me.
Yeah.
So it kind of teaches people also to be like, oh, because a lot of business owners, right? They get out there and you talk to them and they're like, why would anybody ever pay for this? But if you can, it's not what you say, it's how you say it and how you approach the deal. And so if you can do it right, people pay a lot of money for things that we do.
Yeah.
because either they don't have the time, they don't want to learn about it, they don't care. Like we do appointment setting, and I go, yeah, but you could teach your secretary how to do this, and they're like, I don't have the time. All right, so that's where we come in, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Huh? That's great. That's good business, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, as far as, you said you've sold all kinds of different things. Has there been a certain product that you have just enjoyed selling the most?
Business, like franchise, like I got my franchise developer right now is what I guess is what they're called. This is really fun, but I really loved selling cars.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. The atmosphere at times got kind of wild, and I eventually left that because it was just a little crazy, but it was a lot of fun selling cars. Like, it's fun. Like, the big purchases in your life, think about it. You're like, the most money you'll ever spend is usually a car and a house. And so to see somebody get their dream car and for you to be part of that is really special. It's really fun. It's really special.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I mean, that's, I think what happens is, and you know this because you train people, is people get into numbers so much of like, I've got to turn so many,
Yeah.
and they lose the joy of the outcome. It's like,
Right.
like you got to enjoy the outcome or you're never going to work hard to get to the outcome. I mean, it's just, you're a robot at some point,
Yeah, yeah. Well, and same goes for like business owners who are selling stuff, or if you're a car sales. And that's the thing is, like, I had so I've sold $100,000 Mercedes Benzes. I've sold $500,000 pieces of machinery, like metal industrial fabrication equipment,
Yeah.
and I've sold $100,000 pieces of software, like SaaS, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you do the same, like I've done the same things, and people don't believe me, but I was pretty successful in my SaaS career. Like, that was only 2 years. SaaS wasn't my favorite. Like, I'm more of a different kind of sale, but it was fun, and I was successful, and it was the same principles, right? Like, so we did a lot of just like assumptive selling. I call it like, well, and I don't call it that. It's been called that, like in some of the sales studies, right? Like assumptive selling, and just not beating around the bush. Like, I don't ever let people guess, right? Because sales is about managing expectations. And how do you do that? You just don't let people guess on their own. You don't let the story in their head go wherever it wants to go, right? Because if we do that, we're going to lose pretty quick, right? So we want to control the story, and not in a manipulative way or a bad way. We just want to keep it real. Like, you wouldn't believe, like, a great example of this is, like, you wouldn't believe some people who come into the car dealership or come into a SaaS company or whatever, but I'll just use cars in this case, right? You wouldn't believe the number of people who would come into a dealership and think that you could get a $20,000 car on a 5-year loan for $150 a month. Like, it just doesn't, the math just doesn't work, right?
Right. Yeah.
and however you want to negotiate, right? But if you just look at the math, like, it doesn't work like that, and people would be like, it's crazy, right? And so how do you control that situation, right? You get ahead of it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
I could talk about sales all day, man.
No, and that's why I brought you on, and I was, after looking at what you do, I'm like, man, this is the perfect guy, because I think, like, if you don't have sales in a business of really any kind, you're not going to make it. And that's that's the truth. I mean, it's the backbone of any business that's selling a product or a service.
Mm-hmm.
And from my experience, a lot of owners don't understand the sales side. They built the product, or they know the service, but the sales, they just don't really have a clue. So is that something you talked about? You have your own business. Is that something you do, is go in and set up a sales system for them, and like, here's how we're going to sell your product or service? Is that kind of what you do then?
Okay. Yeah. And believe it or not, like I said, like, the nuances are different. Like, each company has the different questions that we need answered, and how that works. Right. But for the most part, like, so the bones and the structure is the same. We might get into the nuances different, but that's why it's pretty simple. Like, we can go in and really help somebody's sales right away, because the process is the same no matter what.
Yeah. So give me like a example of a business that you've taken, from here to here, just with putting sales in place.
Yeah, for sure. So we had the one that comes to the top of my mind here in Salt Lake City. There's an amazing company called the National Permanent Cosmetics Academy. So they teach young women. So they're like a college, not a college, but like an education center.
Okay.
And like a school. And they teach primarily young women how to start their own business in like estheticians and cosmetology and permanent cosmetics and things like that. So they go over like brows and I don't know, I'm a guy, so but like lips and brows, and they teach these young women how those skills, and then they teach them how to run their business, and then they give them a space. So they basically like help these girls start a business.
That's really
and,
cool.
and become independent. And yeah, it was really cool. So I was like super blessed to be able to work with them because it was a really cool mission. And they were struggling with sales. And so I got in there and we went, it took me about 3 meetings to figure out, all right, this is what we need to do. And we had 3 meetings, set their process up in place, got the questions they need to ask, how are we going to follow up, what's our schedule going to be like, all that stuff. And, that took us a month. We had 3 meetings over a month. There was a lot more communication between that, in between those 3 calls. Right.
Yeah.
But the next month, so they had gone like $30K a month, which isn't bad, right? $30K a month in sales.
Yeah.
The month after I helped them and we put that process in place and we trained up their sales team, they wrote $200K.
Wow.
And it's not, and it wasn't me. Like we just put the right pieces in, right? Like we just plugged the holes in the ship and put it in the right direction. Like that's what's cool. Like I don't need to take credit for any of that because I wasn't the one selling it. But when you have that direction, right, you can make as much money as you want.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that for me as a consultant, I that's what a lot of times that's all people need is just tweaking of a system or a system put in, and it's just like that, like one little thing can just change dramatically. So very cool. Very cool. So if somebody is like, because what I'm trying to do with this podcast is we have a lot of people that watch that are thinking of starting a business or new, so what skill does someone need to be a good salesperson?
I would say there's 2, and it's really easy, and they're kind of the same, but I break them up so that people get it. The first one's empathy, and the second one's just curiosity and listening, and I kind of put those in the same, but like just listen. Yeah. Right. And then there's a lot that goes into that, but if you just have empathy and you can listen to somebody, and they can feel that, you're gonna be fine.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good advice for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know you have the sales side. Do you get into, I mean, you're an overall business consultant as well? Are you helping them with?
I mean, I get into a little bit of that, right? Because inevitably once you start selling, right, what a lot of people don't realize is too many sales can hurt you just as bad as too few sales, right? So like my background is in accounting.
Okay.
Actually, it's funny, dude. Like how I market myself is my unique pairings. So I got my bachelor's in accounting and an MBA in finance. So I thought I was going to do money, right?
Yeah.
Turns out I did that for a little bit on the side. Like I went like for 2 weeks and shadowed people, and I was like, nope, this isn't it. But the good news is both of those degrees are business oriented and they're very valuable no matter where you go. So it wasn't a waste of time or money for me. And so like when you're in accounting and you learn those principles, you actually learn that like most businesses that go out of business are profitable.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The 2 things they lack are like cash flow and the systems, right? So like it's cool. It'd be cool to have 50 leads a day, but if you don't have the ops to handle that, then we can get in trouble real quick. So actually when I do sales consulting, one of the questions that I ask to like qualify a customer is like, how many sales do you think you could handle? And don't tell me 1 million, because unless you actually can handle 1 million, right? You know what I'm saying? Because like, if you're not ready for that, like, because if I turn the faucet on, it's just as bad if you don't have it ready as if the faucet never turned on. And so, with all that, that was a roundabout way of me saying I do a little bit of that. I make sure, because if they tell me no, then we can look at it and maybe it's something easy I can fix, but I'm not a master. Like I definitely know where my lane is. But if it's something small, then we'll go there. then I can help plug that in because I know enough, right?
Yeah.
But if it's something that I'm like, "Ooh, this is kind of crazy," then I'll refer it out to someone else.
Yeah.
But if it's like a small solopreneur, that operation I can handle. But if you're dealing with pretty complex sale, then I can pass that off. So
Gotcha.
it depends. So I do business scaling, but it depends on. I only do it usually for small teams.
Yeah. Yeah. So you touched on it a little bit, but how are you finding your clients? I mean, what I guess my question is, there a lot of competition in what you're doing, or
Oh, for
you
sure.
know, there is. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, but like that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I think it's a great thing. If you were the only one in your industry, that means that I hate to say it, but like if you're the only one in your industry, it's not because you were the first one to think of it. It's probably because
It doesn't
no one
work.
else could no one else can figure out how to make it work. So no, it's sales coaching. I mean, dude, just type that into Google. There's a million that are going to come
Yeah.
up. Outsource SDR and account executive companies. There's a million. So how do I find clients? And by the way, this is what I teach. So there's levels to sales, right? So the first thing we got to do in sales is we got to like find leads. Like we got to lead gen.
Mm-hmm.
And there's 3 ways. There's only 3 ways. Well, 4 maybe, but you can kind of lump them into the same. So there's outbound. So you got cold calling, cold email, right? There's the inbound stuff, which is like paid ads and all that whole world of marketing. And then you have like referrals and strategic partners. And that's the biggest one. So actually I do a lot of strategic partnership building. So I work with like a lot of marketing companies.
Okay.
So like if a marketing company says like, I'll run your ads for you, I partner with those people because then actually that marketing company can say that they offer more to their customers with me, because they go, all right, not only will we run your ads, but we actually have a team here who can, when those leads come in, we'll call them and set up the appointment and you don't have to do anything.
Yeah. That's
and
nice.
so you kind of like, so strategic partners are like huge, and it's a real easy pitch for me. It's like, hey, you offer ads? Cool. I'll set the appointments. You charge them more. We'll do a partnership together. However we're going to do that, however you and I negotiate that.
Yeah.
And then your customer win. Like that's a great deal.
Yeah. Yeah. You bring the professional in to handle that part of it. So it's funny you said that, because on Tuesday I interviewed a guy that's been in marketing a long time, and that he said that's the biggest struggle for him is still trying to get people to understand that it's all about building relationships, because we get behind this screen and on a computer, and we forget about going out and shaking hands and building those, like what you just talked about, your referral system. I mean, that's the only way you make it in business in general. I mean, if you don't have referrals, you're dead.
Yeah. Well, I have strategic partnerships with other sales training companies and lead gen companies, because like I'm like, dude, these guys need a lot more than I can handle. So, and they toss me stuff and I toss them stuff, because the thing is like, we're not really in competition. Like that's one thing I learned in sales. It's like, I really don't have any competition, and not because I'm like arrogant or I'm conceited or anything like that, but like there's enough for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can live and reach all my goals, and you can live and reach all your goals, and we can do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's that abundance mindset, right? Like,
yeah,
that's cool. And if I lose a deal to somebody, I go, all right, cool.
Yeah.
It's fine with me. I got a lot on my plate. I can, you know what I mean? We got a lot of work, so it's all good, man.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, that's a good mindset, because sometimes people get very frustrated when they lose a deal or something, but I mean, it's going to happen for sure.
Well, and I take it one step deeper, because I love philosophy and stuff, right? But and so whenever somebody tells me that, like I'm working with a salesperson, like, oh, I lost this deal, and I get all like Mr. Miyagi on people, and I'll be like, well, but can you lose something you never really had?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
It's all right, dude. Then we'll just go. We'll keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure you've heard this, because I was always the person that never could say no. I'd figure out how to do it, but it bit me in the ass quite a few times when I did it. But I finally learned that sometimes you don't, there's clients that are just not right for you,
Yeah.
because every time I take on something that probably wasn't the right fit, it would be a nightmare, like,
Always.
so yeah.
Always.
Yeah. So that
Always.
was a big learning curve for me. It took me years, I mean, to figure that out, like, because
Yeah.
it's hard to pass up business, you're like, yeah, I'll do it. And then you're like, oh
Yeah.
man, why did I do this?
Yeah. You're like, I should have done that. Well, it's actually funny that you mentioned that, right? Because we're both in sales. And so one of the buzzwords around sales is, of course, closing.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to learn how to prospect, but everybody wants to learn how to close. And I have my own thoughts on that. If you want to get into it, I'd be more than happy to. But whenever somebody goes like, how do you become a good closer? Like, my number one closing technique is saying no.
Yeah.
Like, if I can qualify a lead, then I can unqualify a lead. And if I don't think you're a good fit up front, it's not because of anything other than, like, that's why I have referrals of my competitors, quote unquote, right? Because like, I'll send them, hey, I don't think I'm the right fit, but here's 3 other companies. I work really well with them. They do great work. Go check them out.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just say, and like, but like, no is very powerful. Like,
Yeah.
So one of the things in marketing, right, that they teach you, that they teach all the time is like scarcity, right? Like, why is Rolex so expensive right now? Because you can't get one. And they're like, and then they say some BS, like you'll go to a marketing coach and they'll say some BS like, you got to be like Rolex and make your scarcity, right? But I'll do business with whoever, bro. There's no scarcity in my business, right? So so as a one-man band, as a salesperson, how do you create scarcity? You create it with like that no, right? Like, hey, I don't think we can do that. Or like, hey, I don't think this is a good fit. Right. And sometimes they'll walk away and you got to be cool with that. But sometimes they'll be like, well, hold on, I really like you. So maybe let's, work on this. Right. Like that. So like one of my favorite books, non-sales books, is by Mark Manson, and it's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. And the first chapter in the book is, he titles it Don't Try. And the thesis behind this chapter is kind of the principle of like this old, Taoist principle of like Wu Wei, which is like kind of just flow, right? Like, and don't try. Like if you like sports, this will be a perfect analogy. Oh, yeah. You can tell when someone's trying to force something,
right?
Like they're trying too hard. Like or like when you're singing, like you're trying too hard. Like you got to just let it happen. And so that's sales. Like, yeah. People know when you're trying to force it, and the thing that happens in your brain when I think you're trying to force it is I immediately like your primal brain immediately goes into that fight or flight. Like, hey, something's not right because this shouldn't be this hard. And so whether I'm new or I'm actually trying to manipulate you, somebody's brain is going like, this isn't right, so I'm out. Right. And so gotcha. you in order to not trigger that, you have to just, Wu Wei, just like go with it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, anyway.
So I've got your website up, and so I'm clear. Do you teach people how to do sales and grow their business? Is that part of what you do?
Okay. So I teach people how to sell. If you don't want me to teach you, I got a team that'll do it for you.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So we do it. Yeah, I do it all.
Okay. Very cool.
That's a lot of fun.
And do you work with, obviously you're in Salt Lake. Are you working with people that live all over the country?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We write processes for people all over the place. That's the cool thing about, COVID was a lot of things, but it was great because it gave us a lot of tools to work remotely anywhere. So sales you can be, a lot of this we can do remote. So it's nice.
Okay. Got you. I'm just trying to clarify what you do.
Of course,
make sure we're on the same page. So yeah. So as far as you talked about implementing, systems and putting things in place. So how hard is it? Because I know how hard this is to find quality people to fill. Like if you go to a company and say, I'm gonna like for instance, the company you took to 200K in a month. How did they cover that? Did they already have the staff to do it, or?
Yeah. So, I mean,
Okay.
and that's one of the things we talk about, right? Like, so a big piece in sales is just qualifying somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like it's cool. We all want to get to $1 million a month and have 1 million leads and not know what to do with everything, right? But
Right.
what I tell people is like, we've got to get to that point. So like, if we want to get there, you're going to need this many salespeople because, sales isn't a numbers game, but there is some math to it,
Right.
right? Like you're gonna each salesperson can only generate so much. So, one of the things in the car dealership was like, yeah, cool. Like and this is on any sales team. So let me just back up real quick. On any sales team, if you're the salesperson, you want to be the only one because you want all the business coming to you and so you can make $1 million. But as a business owner, you know that that's just not possible.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you want to hit X, you need this many salespeople because they're all going to close at 20 or 30%. That means, and if you got 5 people closing at 30%, that means you need, 30. That means you need like 250 leads coming in the door at a minimum a month to get these guys fed if they're closing 30%, which is a great closing percentage, by the way. And if you do that, right, then all of them are going to set whatever and get whatever, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
and that was just a really simple model. Like it gets a lot more complicated when we talk about like the length of the sales cycle, the price of the thing we're selling, how we sell it, and all this stuff. So at a basic level, that's kind of how it works, and that's what I kind of help businesses walk through. It's like, how many salespeople do we need to actually hit that, and then how many leads do we need, right?
Yeah.
And leads, whether we get them inbound, outbound, or through strategic partnerships, how many do we need a month, right? So like we have 4 salespeople, right? And we were just doing goals for next year.
Mm-hmm.
And if we want to hit our number, we have to have 200 leads coming through the door every month from all of our sources. So that changes how we look at potential vendors for marketing and lead gen, right?
Gotcha. Okay. So, I mean, definitely a planning and strategy for sure. It reminds me, I mean, many years ago, I had a company and we doubled in probably 6 months, and and staffing was a nightmare. To keep up the service was a nightmare, and that's why I asked earlier, because it wasn't anything that we did on the sales side other than defining our systems and just putting better systems in place is really what did it. But yeah, I mean, I learned a lot during that time of just like, man, you got to be prepared because it's so hard to find good people. I mean, it's even worse these days, the people that actually want to work or quality people that'll come in and represent your company correctly. So yeah,
100%.
Yeah, that's hard, man. Very hard. So, and I'm sure you get a lot of business from that because it's like, we can't find salespeople that can sell, or they don't show up, blah, blah, blah. And
yeah. Or even like, as tragically as it is, like it's actually, look, I'm very stoic in my philosophy of life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really define things as good or bad. So we've all heard of the tech layoffs, right? And by the way, I like I mentioned earlier, I have my own business, but I love being on sales team. I was actually affected by the tech layoffs. So like when they were chopping people's heads off for no reason, I was one of them.
Yeah.
And that's the best part about sales and the worst part about sales is you're the last guy, you're the first guy out and usually the last guy in because people are like, I don't need salespeople. But with all that being said, like the layoffs are an opportunity. They're a really good opportunity on both sides to hire people, for me to hire good salespeople, and then to go back to those companies and be like, look, you couldn't afford a whole SDR team, so let me do it. We'll charge you whatever, right? Less than it costs to run a whole SDR team.
Right.
Because you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars a month to run a 10-person SDR team, right? So you don't pay me nearly that much, and we'll do it for you. And by the way, I'll employ all the guys that are left, and everybody eats and everybody wins. So layoffs are terrible. I would never wish it on anybody. It was some of the most stressful moments of my life for sure. But where there's an obstacle, there's an opportunity.
Yeah.
And I choose to believe that and live that way because it helps me, keeps me sane, man. It keeps me sane.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, for sure. So let's get off of all that stuff and like,
sure.
who's Dalton, man? I mean, what tell me what you like to do. How long you've been in Salt Lake?
Yeah, man. Yeah. So I actually originally grew up in Iowa.
Okay.
I'm from a pretty poor town in Iowa, like probably 70% of the high school, K through 12 was on reduced lunches, food stamps. Like we were in a pretty poor part of Iowa. And that was but I loved it.
Yeah. There
is something different, like, cause now I'm obviously successful and I do well enough and all that good stuff. And there's something that you don't get when you have a life like I've built versus a life in poverty. And I'm not saying that I don't get political, but I just know that like, so real quick, just about me, I'll get a little deeper, right? So I have a tattoo on my arm, of an old Latin phrase called amor, and it's amor fati, which is the love of fate, which is everything in my life is part of my story. And that's how I got here. Right. Like, so we've interviewed a lot of people. Like you have a podcast. I've interviewed over 250 entrepreneurs. I've spent over 300 hours interviewing people. And what's cool is everybody starts somewhere similar to mine. And they love it and they never regret it. I mean, obviously we want to eradicate poverty and we want all that stuff.
Yeah.
But like knowing that was part of my story and it built who I was today. And I've talked to people like that, and you talk to people like that who they went through the hardest moments of their life to get to where they are right now. And the same answer is the same. They wouldn't change it for anything. They wouldn't go back and do it any differently.
Yep.
Because it's part of the story. And so I grew up in Iowa. I wasn't going to be a farmer or a factory worker. Not that those are bad. The Midwest is the backbone of the United States. A lot of things we have in the city wouldn't exist if we didn't have the Midwest, right? So I love it. It's got my heart. But it wasn't for me. Like I knew I wasn't going to do that. I couldn't do that. And so I went to college. I went to Colorado State University. Got an accounting degree because my mother was a CPA.
Okay.
And funny enough, I served an ecclesiastical mission for my church.
Okay.
And we were knocking on these doors. We were going door to door, and they were really nice houses in St. George, like where High School Musical was filmed.
Oh yeah,
like that golf course.
I know St. George very well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So in Trotta, you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah.
They got like rivers running through their backyard.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, so I was like, wow, these are crazy houses. And so it's like, whatever, I'll show my true colors. But instead of doing what I was supposed to be doing, which was spreading the good word, I knocked every door and I was like, what do you do for a living? Like, have you seen those TikTok videos? Like, I live in your car. What do you do for a living? Right. I did that, but I was, they all thought it was weird. I was weird. But anyway, I was like, what do you do for a living? And everybody was like, they either owned a business or they got an MBA. So I didn't go back to Iowa. I actually stayed in Utah and got a business degree, went and got an MBA, fell right into sales because I didn't have any money.
Yeah.
And it was, so anyway, so I knew that you could make a lot of money in sales. And funny story that I tell all the time about how I got into sales is, so I hustled through high school. I loved selling stuff. Like I sold, I actually got kicked out of school for a little bit, like suspended from school for a little bit because the a la carte, like they have the a la carte stuff in the lunchroom where you can buy snacks or whatever.
Right.
I went to school and I saw those and I was like, man, this is so expensive. And then I remember going to Walmart with my mother that night and being like, I saw the candy right there. I saw a bag of Skittles and I was like, I can buy this for $1.50. They're selling it for $3. I was like, I could buy this for $1.50, sell it and make money and still charge less than what my school was doing. So I did. I bought a bunch of it.
There you go, man. I love
and
that.
And then they caught me and they kicked me out. So,
Yeah.
and then that's when I learned about the man. So anyway, with all that, but I did all that stuff. And when they do the high school, when you're a senior, they do the most likely to awards.
Yeah.
Like who's the most likely to succeed or whatever. Right. So I won most likely to be a con artist.
Oh
I think it was a joke,
dude. That's terrible.
But why though? Why did I win that? Because nobody in my hometown knew what sales was. Like I didn't know what sales were.
Yeah.
We didn't have salespeople. Like I never met a salesperson in my life.
But you were already selling. You just didn't really know what selling was,
and
right?
You knew what it was called, right? Like, and then you learn like that's actually how businesses work. Is they buy something for less and sell it for more, right?
Yeah.
And so I won that award. I always grew up like you could sell ice to an Eskimo and all this stuff. So I walked in and I was like, all right, well, if we can make a lot of money, then I'll try it. Like, I'm like, don't have anything anyway, right? So what are they going to take from me? Nothing.
Yeah.
Ended up being one of the best decisions ever, man. I dove into sales. I learned everything I could. Invested a ton of money into myself and my education, both formal and informal, a lot of books and stuff. So anyway, I do a lot of that. But one of the things that I love in sales and why I feel like I'm a different salesperson or a sales coach or trainer than somebody else is, I don't focus on the psychology of selling. I focus on the philosophy of selling.
Okay.
And not to say that the psychology of selling isn't important, right? Like we got to know things, but more importantly is like how you deal with the process of selling. Like that's more important than all this psychology bullshit. And by the way, most of it, sorry if I swore.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay, cool. But like, it's all the psychology stuff. Like they'll do the middle pricing or, they're doing this. Like I talked about some of the psychology before, right? Like I know it, but once you get into all that, you start getting commission breath. But if you realize like what's the philosophy of selling? You can't control other people. Don't focus on goals, focus on habits that help you become the person who hits those goals, right?
Yeah.
And give a shit about someone else other than you.
Mm-hmm.
That's a salesperson. You'll do just like if that's all you did and you never picked up a psychology book, like How to Win Friends or Influence People or Persuasion or any of this other, or Influence or any of this other stuff. If you just had those three, you'd do fine. You'd be fine. You'd make $150,000 a year and you'd be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I mean, the way it used to be, and I know, this is like, quantity over quality, you need to make 500 sales calls to, and it's, so I like your mindset because there's still people that are teaching that method. Like, all right, sit down right here. You need to 200 calls right now, and you're just a robot. Like, hey,
That's wild. Well, the market is kind of getting us away from that, right? Because like way back when social media was brand new, like nobody really put their lives on there, and now everybody puts their life on there. And now people are like, we've come full circle with social media, where like it used to be a way for us to meet new people, but now we really don't want to meet new people. We want to find our community. We want to find our tribe, and we want people who care about us, and we want people who share the same values with us. And so sales is kind of getting away from that. Like if you want, like when people are like, how do I write a good cold email or whatever? I go, there's only one rule for cold emails or cold calling or cold messaging or whatever. There's only one rule. And that's you have to give them a really good reason for them to pick up the phone. And that is personalized. Like you have to, just go to their LinkedIn and read their last post.
Yeah.
Some salespeople don't even do that. And that takes like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, I mean, you kind of hinted on something there. So for a person that's prospecting, what methods do you suggest, I guess? I know it depends on what you're selling or whatever, but
well, there's one always tried and true, and that's just a phone call. And people will fight me and they'll be like, well, I don't like getting cold calls. And that's because you've never heard a really good one. Like I take cold calls all the time and they're great. It's like, whatever. So calling is great. But again, like you have to have a good guide, a good script for your cold calls or cold emails. And here's what people say. Cause somebody's listening to this and they're going to go like, yeah, sales calls make me sound robotic. And my answer to that is this: look, think of your favorite movie. One of my favorite movies is Black Panther.
Mm-hmm.
And that movie was incredible, not because of just the story, right? Because that story has been around forever, as comic books and all this stuff. But the actors internalized the script because that movie had a script.
Yeah.
And those actors are paid to stick to the script. Right. So that movie was great because the actors made themselves the characters, and there would have been no difference between them and that in real life. Right. So that's what a script is. It shouldn't, it's not meant to be read robotically. It's meant for you to internalize it, make it your own, make it fit your voice, and then go deliver it. Right.
Yeah.
And so, I still think that calling and emailing and DMing are great, but you got to like know who you're talking to, actually care about who you're talking to, and then have a really, really effective script.
Cool.
And make sure that you stick to it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I heard you, because I think you got to know who you're talking to. And I talk to businesses about, what's your market? Who are you selling to? And a lot of times they have no clue. I'm selling to everybody. Okay, but does your service actually fit into everybody? So
well, and like, because like early in sales, I was always very skeptical of like the persona, and the target market, and I was like, dude, this is crazy. I'll just go out and sell it, right? But again, that's not empathetic, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I made the most money in sales, is when I knew who I was selling to, like. The time I made the most money is when I was selling to people just like me, who were just like, dude, I have a family. I drive 30 minutes to work every day.
Yeah.
I think to myself, there's got to be something more than this. And I'm just looking and I can't find anything. And like, that's how you like, I was selling to people. And when you pitch it like that, you're like, wow, that sounds exactly like me. This guy knows, this guy listens, empathy by definition is sharing, understanding and sharing the thoughts and feelings of someone else, right? And that you can make really quick changes. So I know we're probably close to time, but something that I did that really helped my sales career, and I actually got it from the book. Have you ever read Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss?
I have not.
It's an amazing book. It's probably the best book I've ever read on negotiating.
Okay.
And it's really cheesy because he's an FBI hostage negotiator, and my sales are not life and death, right? So it's like, how the hell does this apply? But there's a lot of really good principles, and he breaks it down really well. So anyway, but in the book, one thing he did to get ready for like hostage negotiation was he volunteered at the National Suicide Hotline. So I read that piece in the book, and I was like, well, I wonder if I could. It was so crazy, but this is where the story gets wild. I was like, maybe I can do that to get better at sales. And so I joined and I volunteered to be a crisis counselor for the crisis text line. So you got the National Suicide Hotline where you call in.
Right.
There's another service where you can text in. So you don't have to pick up the phone. You don't have to you don't have to feel like that awkwardness when you're talking to people, right? It's called the crisis text line. And it's a great service. If anybody needs it, text them. But anyway, I got trained up, volunteered for that. And what people don't know when you go into a suicide hotline or you go to the crisis negotiator, or when you're ever talking to someone in that thing, like if you have a problem and you call into one of these places, the craziest part of it is they actually have time limits. There are some, right? There's an exception to every rule, right?
Right.
So obviously I've talked for 2 hours, but generally speaking, there's a time limit. Like generally we had 40 minutes, whether the person came in and they said, I'm ready to end my life right now, or they said, I'm not having a good day, 40 minutes for both of them. But that was crazy. The crazier thing is the person who said like, I'm ready to end my life, and we only had 45 minutes. 99% of the time, we got them to cool down in 40 minutes. Like it actually worked. You're like, how does that work, right? Well, they call this empathy MVPs. And right, so if someone says that to you, even if it's really hard, even if it's your best friend that you've known since you were a kid.
Yeah.
But like when you're on the text line, not only do I not know your name, right? For the maybe I'll get your first name. Maybe I got your first name, right? But I don't have 12 years to be your childhood friend, right? Mm-hmm. So how do we persuade somebody? And it was like one rule. Like if I could boil down empathy into one sentence, is give a shit about somebody. Like,
yeah,
like show some vulnerability. Like, and so that's how but it was, I did it for a year because that was a commitment they made you make. So I did it for a year. It was the hardest year.
Oh, I can imagine.
It was crazy. We had a lot of highs and lows. They did a lot of self-care for the volunteers, and but I learned then that you can make a lot of progress with people in 40 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it, you think, I mean, and I don't want to keep dragging it on, but you think like, is it a mindset thing where you're prepared? Okay, I got 40 minutes to make this happen.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead.
If they told you had 20 minutes, could you make it happen? I mean, we're just like, that's how we're programmed, right? It's like, okay, I got 20 minutes. I got to get on this and make it happen. So.
Yeah. But time kind of like, so what's your goal, right? Like what's your goal with every conversation? And when I was a crisis counselor, it was get the conversation from hot to cold. Mm-hmm. If I'm in a sales conversation, it's get as much info as I can to see if I'm actually a good fit. So if that takes 40 minutes, sweet. If it takes 10 minutes, sweet.
Yeah.
If it takes, there's longer sales cycles where you're selling like Adobe, right? You're selling Adobe to the government, and that's going to take you a lot longer than even 6 months, right?
Yeah.
But like, so just identifying your goal, but then being okay to be flexible with that, right? But it is a mindset. But the mindset isn't anything more than, and I've said it a million times, but it's okay because it's just people don't get it. And so I just got to say it all the time, which is like, just care about somebody. Yeah. Like just show that you care about them.
Yeah.
And I don't know. And is it woo-woo? Sure. I don't care. You call it whatever you want. Right. But it works, man. It works. Like you can be friends. You can feel like you've known somebody forever. You can feel like you've known somebody forever in the first 10 minutes because you just care about them.
Yeah.
You just treat them like a human being. Right.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Who cares? Right.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's a lost art these days, where everybody's in such a hurry. I mean, you don't even know your neighbor type deal, so it's
right.
It's really cool that you've said that multiple times, and I appreciate that from you.
Yeah, because it's just and people will feel it when you do, right? So one of the psychology tips that I give people when they do cold calls is actually funny because we've been talking about empathy this whole time, but I'll give you a counterintuitive approach to empathy. So I tell people not to ask other people how they're doing on a cold call. And you're like, but yeah, you just talked about empathy, right? Except how are you doing? Like, how are you has turned it like, how's it going? Like has turned not from like a sentiment. It's turned into like a greeting, right?
Right.
Like if you get a cold call, like if you get a call from someone you don't know, right? And I got like if I was calling you cold and I was like, hey T Rob, how are you doing today? You'd be like, shitty, what do you want?
Pretty much.
Right. Your friend, like my friends don't call me and ask me how I'm doing.
Right.
They call me because they know how I'm doing, and they're calling to check in or they're calling to double down, and we're gonna have a good time.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So anyway, that's one of the ways. Like, there's a lot of counterintuitive approaches to empathy, but anyway.
Cool, man. So where can listeners find you at? I mean, I've got your website up here, and it looks like, I mean, they can probably, I think did I spell everything right? Hopefully.
Yeah, DaltonKJensen.com. I'm most active on Twitter and LinkedIn, so feel free to message me. I don't charge anybody for consultations or messages online. So if anybody has questions, just hit me up in my DMs. They're always open.
Cool, man. Any final thoughts on anything?
No, this has been a beautiful podcast, man. I really appreciate it. This has been awesome. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for coming on, and make sure you go check let's plug yours again. What's the name of your
Oh yeah,
podcast?
The Thinking Project. Yep, you can find it Spotify, YouTube, Apple, wherever.
Yeah. So make sure you go over and check his stuff out. And thank you, Dalton. Appreciate you. And love to have you back on down the road. And
Absolutely.
Hey, go Jazz, right?
Yeah, go Jazz. That's right, man. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, man. Have a good evening. All right, that was Dalton. And if you really want to learn sales in more of a philosophy side, make sure you go over to daltonkjensen.com. Typically when you're dealing with sales and salespeople in general, a lot of you have this experience that they feel like, I think what he said was commission breath, which I like. So if you're looking for a more different approach and help with your sales in your business, or individually, if you want to learn how to be a good salesperson, definitely hit up Dalton, because he's a great resource. So thank you guys for tuning in. Please subscribe to the channel, share it, help me grow this bad boy, and I appreciate you guys. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, everyone. I'll talk to you next week on Tuesday, same time, same place. Have a great evening.